If by some act of God or by some stroke of luck you have stumbled upon this broadcast, you are listening to The Chivalry Chronicles with your host, DLH, David, and me, Jaime. I hope you're ready, because we are. So let's get into it. So today we're discussing the 6 male personalities of modern men explained. This was a tweet or I don't know what you call on X now, but by @ModernMenGuide. It was just a tweet about this article, and it talked about the 6 male personalities, and I'll list them out: alpha males, beta males, delta males, gamma males, omega males, and sigma males. And I found it interesting because, one, I hadn't heard of all these other different type of males. I'd heard alpha and beta, and so I quickly sent it over to DLH and David and try to get some kind of response from them and see if they had read it, agree with it, or even heard of it. So DLH, had you heard of this? You're you're doing a master's or a PhD and all that, so. You're the scholar of the group.
It's not specifically in that, but I have done plenty of research in the psychological and psychology realm. So no, I had not heard of all of these. Alpha and beta, sure, that come
Right.
around. But when it came to these other ones, and you sent this article over, my first thought was, what? So it was really interesting. Just reading into it and looking into how they were defined,
Right.
by this very short article.
Yeah, it was super brief, and if you want, I can just do a quick description of it. It says we'll start with number 1, which is alpha males. They're assertive and dominant. And beta males are less dominant and more agreeable and cooperative. Delta males often go unnoticed in social settings. They're neither dominant nor submissive and are fairly average in social interactions. Gamma males are contrarians, often rejecting or challenging social norms. Omega males are the bottom of the social hierarchy and often lack social skills. Sigma males reject traditional social hierarchies and value their own interdependence and self-reliance. Now, I thought the kind of cool thing is that they did have examples, and they're pretty, like David would say, pop culture examples. Like Sigma males, you would look at Bruce Wayne, James Bond, and John Wick. Omega males are like Peter Parker, Walter Mitty. Gamma males is Tony Stark, Jack Sparrow, Han Solo. Delta males are Harry Potter, Marty McFly. Beta males, Ron Weasley, Bruce Banner, and then of course alpha males are like your King Leonidas and Captain America. So, I mean, that's kind of a brief description of the personalities. David, what did you find? I mean, did you see yourself in any one of these?
Well, I think for me the biggest thing that I felt in reading all the different types is, as each one has elements of who I am, depending on the situations and so forth. I kind of said, oh, well, I could be that, but then again, no, not because of this. And, quite frankly, I view it as a horoscope, just something somebody came up with. It sounds good. It sounds catchy. For some people, they've recently experienced something that makes them gravitate to whatever that top trait is. In coming across a YouTube video along these similar lines, there was a seventh element.
Yeah.
And I want to just call it BS. I honestly
you
do.
want to, or you're gonna call
Well,
it BS?
I am because back in 7th grade, I was in charge of writing horoscopes for the school paper.
Oh, really?
Yes. And how did
What
I
the
do
hell?
that?
You
just
were in
make up
charge?
stuff. I was in charge of writing the horoscopes.
That's terrible. Whatever ISD that was, they're very flawed.
Yeah. But so, I mean, I think it's one of those things that elements of it come into play depending on what the environment around you, what situation you fall in.
Right.
Maybe within your family dynamic, you fit as the alpha male, but then within friends, you fall down into a different role,
Right.
and it just really is based on all the dynamics of that particular group that you're surrounded by or that situation. That I think you can at least take some of these different elements and leverage them in different situations. So if anything that I gravitated to this, it's just uh, having some situational awareness of where I may fall whenever
Yeah.
I am with the group or in a certain situation to kind of understand, okay, who am I working with that is going to help me lead that change?
Right.
And you know, I think going back to our relationship early on with San Antonio Alumni Association, and just seeing how uh, w- w- we created a different dynamic, and in some cases could really clash with each other.
Correct.
So it did take exploring that a little bit further and getting to know each other a bit further, as well as being very intentional to make things work, so that we could position ourselves. I mean, I think once again, based on situations, we fall in different spectrums of these different personalities that are part of this.
Yeah. So when I read it, my first inclination was like, okay, when was the first time alpha males were used? Because I was talking to y'all earlier, and I said I didn't hear it till like the 2000s. So I did, as we all do, go to Google and type in when was it first used, and I found that it was the earliest use was like in 1938. The actual term alpha male was used, and then it was later used in like in the 1920s. There was a researcher studying chicken hierarchies, and he just gave the top chicken the first Greek letter of alpha, and which makes sense because you do hear pecking order. So I thought it was funny that it was a chicken hierarchy. They also went into there was a in the 70s. You start hearing that term a little bit more, but it kind of caught wind. I read like somewhere in 1999 there was a Time magazine article described by Naomi Wolf, her opinion on Al Gore, calling him a beta male, and I do remember that, and that he needed to act more as an alpha male to be seen as a leader. To me, I don't know where these other ones came from. I mean, I think they're good for discussion, but yeah, I do agree that there's not a lot of substance there. And my question is, what if you have 3 alpha males in one room? I mean, do you revert to a second, like a gamma or into a sigma or something else? I don't know. I know that happens with other personality kind of exams and stuff like that, or personality traits. If you have too many of one, you revert to your second. So,
Or do they butt heads to see who? Yeah.
DLH, do you have like a one personality based on this that is you? Like, would you
No.
define yourself as any one of these?
No, and I think that's why I know that earlier when you said BS, you meant behavioral science.
Yes.
yeah, he's such a scholar.
Yeah.
Hey, I warned you guys.
you know, Now, I tried to give the benefit of the doubt, right, when we hear this sort of stuff. But some of the questions that come to mind automatically are, at what age are you determined to be one of these male personality types, right? And is there any happenings throughout your life where you can shift from one to the other, right? Now, I don't know the answers to these, but what I do know is that when you look at any of the research that's in personality psychology and all of these things, is that we're rarely ever only one thing.
Correct.
Right? There's always overlap. So this lends itself, I think, to the situational thing that you talked about earlier. Why does it have to be one or the other or the other? Why can't we have these be on a spectrum and we tap into, if they want to label it that, fine, but we tap into that skill set in order to handle a conflict. We tap into another one in order to convey love to our, partners and kids and all of that stuff. But no, I don't agree that there would be just one at any one point in time. We're never just one of these things.
But do you think that there's a dominant one, like you are this the majority of the time?
I think that some people maybe who choose not to be more aware of whatever the environment or the situation is can lend itself to that, right? So if we consider the alpha male, since that's the one
Correct.
that usually comes up more often. Now, if they're much more self-assured and they sense, let's say, an environment of chaos, maybe it's not like outright chaos, right? But indecisiveness and all that other stuff, they may invoke that if they're prone to do that, and then say, okay, listen, we're going to get everybody together. This is what we're going to do. Let's go.
Right.
And they start to do that because that would be something that they can invoke at the time. Now, if they walk into a room, and even if there is somebody who does like order and they may consider themselves an alpha male, but you go into an area where whether they're all alpha males or not, if everything is organized,
Squared away.
why do I need to do anything? Everything is organized. We're ready to go. Let's go.
Yeah, you fall in line.
Right, and then we just do what we need to do,
Yeah,
and
the
that
door's
still
already
falls
open, I mean, just walk
within.
through it.
Yeah, it still lends itself to the behaviors of an alpha male without having to take charge.
Right.
Right.
Do you think you have to be self-aware in order to do that? I mean, as you were talking about it, I'm thinking there's a certain amount of people that maybe aren't as self-aware about, I need to do this. They still want to buck the system. I mean, does it take somebody that's more in tune with who they are and what their strengths are to be able to make that decision? You know what? Everything's squared away. I'm going to fall in line. Because you do have those people that, well, I still want to do it this way.
I do think that there are. I think that knowing yourself is helpful for determining what skill set you need to tap into to handle whatever's in front of you, right? Because if we'll just say conflict, because conflict is the easiest example to come into. But if someone is not self-aware and they enter a situation of conflict, they're more apt to react emotionally.
Right.
Right, and if they do that quickly without thinking it through, things don't always turn out in their favor.
Right.
So they may be somebody who taps into multiple of these skill sets, but there are some of these personality traits that will they will tell you that like part of it. And I was reading the dad version of this one that came from the Dad University magazine, but it does talk about being self-aware. Some of them are a little less self-aware and more likely to sort of rush into a situation. But again, I think that's more, all of those factors are coming into play, like the things that you find yourself more prone to doing. Do you work on yourself? Are you even aware that you need to work on some of those things? So there's a bunch of these things that can converge and create the situation that's there.
Jaime, considering you're the one that came across this to begin with, is there a personality trait that you feel that's me most of the time?
No, but I do find when I see articles about personality traits, alpha male type stuff, masculinity, I'm attracted to it because I've read a couple of books about it. I know when we had a son, my first child was a daughter, and then when we had a son, I was like, I need to know a little bit more about that. So I need to start reading about masculinity and how to pass those things down. So when I see stuff like this, I'm interested. And so I don't think, I agree with DLH. I don't think you are any one of these or at any time. But I do think that you kind of settle on one for the majority of the time. And we all like to think of ourselves as alpha males, but
I was going to ask that. Do you?
Do I consider myself?
Well, because we in our hyper masculine world, right? Especially older world. But when it comes up in these things, you now have a list of 7.
Right.
Do you still try to tell yourself, I am alpha, even if you might be better as a sigma male?
I don't think I tell myself I'm an alpha. I think I just do what I normally do. And if I go into an organization and I see it in disarray and I see no one else doing anything, then I will step forward and say, this is what we need to do. If it's, everything's going fine, then I pick a position and I do that to the best of my ability. And I think when David kind of alluded to this, when David came, I was the chairman of the Alumni Association, and I met David. And when I met him, I felt he was a little bit more strong-willed. And so I said, if I don't get David if we don't agree, then we will throw this whole board, you can just throw it out the window. I said, I can't change these 5 guys' mind about David, so I need to get David to agree with me, because if he and I agree, then everything else kind of falls into place.
In fact, is it number
Strong-willed.
6 that has,
Strong-willed was a very nice way.
manipulative.
Yeah. So to me, it was just like, you know what? I need to get to know David. I need to tell him, as the chairman, my vision of this alumni association, and pitch it to him and see if he agrees with it. Because if he doesn't, then we have bigger issues. If he agrees with it, now we can do things.
Right. And I think in that very scenario you're talking about, that would already be multiple of these personality types, right?
Correct.
Because the alpha male is okay with taking charge, but then when you think outside yourself and recognize the strength, or we'll say spirit, of another,
right,
and then you have to put yourself in a position to get someone else to buy into the idea, right? Now that's automatically now out of the alpha because you are concerned with the perception of someone else to get them on board with your idea. Yeah. And then how do we get those ideas to merge in order for us to move together?
Correct.
Yeah, we did that hiking trip.
I was just going to mention that. Yes.
We did the hiking trip to the Guadalupe Mountain earlier this year, and our current chairman, MT, he's really just stepped into the role over the year, and in those situations, I don't know if as an alpha man you concede that, knowing that that's the leadership that comes into play, or you're accepting that somebody else is taking the lead, and you're conceding that you're confident that they can lead, and you're willing to then go filter down to a delta or whatever. I also wonder, Jaime, like, I would suspect, I may be totally wrong, and this is where I'm making the ask, but considering your work role of leading a group, you're doing that, heck,
all
at
the
least
time.
45 hours a week, if not a lot more, right?
Yeah.
So you take that, you come home to your household,
right?
As a person within this household, you carry a lot of influence,
right?
So knowing that, and then of course the 10 years of being a chairman,
right?
I mean, do you think you just feel you're alpha because that's the role that's been presented to you, and you just accepted that challenge?
I think when you get married and then you have children, you have to be that role, right? Like, you have to. Now, in the home dynamic, my wife makes a lot of the decisions with like the kids and stuff like that. And sometimes because at work you make every decision, you're like, I'm okay with her making those decisions. What sucks for her is that she makes all the decisions at her job too, and she has to come home and then make additional decisions. And that's some things that we talk about too. But I think when you have children, you have to fall into that role. I'm a project manager at my job. I have 6 people that are under me that I have to direct every day, every hour. And so you're in that role all the time. And sometimes you don't want to be in that role. It just gets, but it's kind of what you have to do. And so to me, you were talking about we do need to do a podcast on that hiking trip. But what
when we're 6 hours in.
Yeah. What I thought you were gonna get into is that, it was a bunch of us with the Alumni Association, and David, because he had researched the trip, he took the lead. He's like, I'll get to the front. And so when I said, okay, David knows, basically is the expert about this trail because none of us looked it up. I felt, and my role was like, you know what? I'm going to go to the end of the line because there was like 6 or 7 of us. And I said, I'm going to go to the end of the line to check to make sure everyone is okay. Yeah. Because it was pretty strenuous. It wasn't just your basic little hike.
Which, you know, standing at the back is not necessarily, doesn't mean you're not leading either.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And so when we started breaking off into different kind of different roles, I think you started seeing the sort of the different roles that people took. I think MT kind of started taking the role of, let me get with these guys that were a little bit behind us, and I moved up behind you, and there was a couple people between us. And so I think when you understand, when you trust people, when you trust he's going to get it done.
His role set.
His role is set. My role, I think that trip was more like, man, I got to be the doomsayer. I got to say, we need to prepare for us that we're probably not going to make it. I think you took the role as like, we're doing it. We're on. We're gonna.
Yeah, I was probably the most optimistic.
Yes.
Person when I know I don't want to say pessimistic. But yeah, usually I'm trying to be critical of everything.
And because you filled that role, I was more like, look, at the pace we're going, it's going to be dark, and we're not going to make it back during light. So I think we need to pick a time to say this is when we're turning back. And I think you and I were kind of going back and forth, and I was like, okay, you know what? Because I've known you for what 8 or 9 years. I was like, I'm going to trust, and I'm going to keep going forward. I go, but I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. We're going to be hiking in the dark, and we're not prepared for that. And you're like, we'll be fine. And I was like, okay, cool, let's go. And that's what happened. Now, do I regret going through it? No. I love that trip. It sucked. I mean, it was really, really hard. But I think following, sometimes followership, we talk about that too. It's just as important as leadership. I mean, I trusted that you were going to leave us. And if something happened, we knew that the 3 of us would get it done. And so to me, that's where I thought you were going with just how everybody kind of took a role. And I think MT stayed with the guys that were a little bit slower. You, me, and I think it was Miguel went forward and kept going. And I think everybody kind of knew what they were doing, which I thought was kind of cool. And I think it kind of plays into these different roles.
Yeah, well, and then your comment there about just leading, right? When I was reading these two, I was reading over your on your paper, but it's because of the difference between these two. We talk about the Modern Men's Guide, the one that started this whole thing, right? And when we read their definition of alpha males are assertive and dominant. They often take charge in social settings, have high social status, and are charismatic leaders. They're the center of attention, like a CEO, who can effortlessly command a room. Now, when I put that in contrast to the alpha male defined by Dad University, right? This one says the alpha male is often seen as the epitome of masculinity. He exudes confidence, assertiveness, and a commanding presence, which sounds the same. But then alphas are natural leaders, unafraid to take charge and make decisions. They thrive in competitive environments and are driven to achieve success, right? So that sounds the same up until this point. But then this is where the Dad University separates himself. He says alpha males tend to be charismatic and attract attention wherever they go. They exude a strong sense of self-worth and are not easily swayed by the opinions of others. However, and perhaps because of this, it is important for alpha males to strike balance between assertiveness and empathy in all of their interactions to build stronger and longer-lasting relationships. Right? And I think that's important because an alpha male, if you're going to be a natural leader does not always mean calling the shots or dictating what happens.
Right.
It's recognizing the strengths in your team and allowing them to lead when they are stronger in that whatever it is that is necessary, right? So I think it takes a good, strong leader to recognize when someone has a skill, even if it's in that moment that you don't have.
Right.
You're on it. You take the lead. Go. It's your show.
You're
I'm
on.
following. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
And that's what a good leader should do.
now DLH, aside from 7, 6, whatever personalities, once again BS, but
Behavioral science.
what is it that you feel you do when you're presented within a new group? Like what types of either personality traits are you looking for? How are you scanning the room and then ultimately defining this is probably my role within this group? And you can even just throw out a random group and dissect it from there. But what does that look like for you? Is there something that you can subconsciously surface? And
I really don't know that my process would be any different than any other. I mean, y'all can tell me, but when I enter a room or a group, I'm more apt to stay silent because I can't come in and command, like leadership over a group that I don't know. I don't know what they need. I don't know what the dynamic is. Honestly, I don't even know if I'm going to remain. I need to see what the dynamic is in there, what the agenda is, how they get along. And then there's a couple things that I'm looking for. Am I in the right place, right? Is this where I feel like I want to be? Am I informed on any of the things that y'all are talking about? And if not, let me learn instead of trying to interject something and speaking for the sake of speaking. But if there is a point where I think that I do have some knowledge, I try and offer that knowledge based on how I think it would best be heard within that dynamic, right? And then over time, that's just how I insert myself into the group. And then I'm either going to be received or not received. And then depending on how that goes, I'll give more feedback or less. Because if I give feedback and it's never heard and I'm not, right, then I'm just going to withdraw. But if it is heard and I do feel valued in that, it doesn't mean that my idea always has to be the lead or the one taken or whatever. But the fact that it would be accepted, heard, and even if it's not the one that we go with, you still feel value in that, right? The fact that you were heard. So it's certainly multi-step and takes time.
Yeah.
Jaime, do you do anything in particular or something different?
No, I think.
We'll be back after a quick break.
If you're in the greater San Antonio area, we have an event for you this October. The Omega Delta Phi San Antonio Alumni Association will be hosting its 12th annual Halloween-themed Fall Festival. It will be held at the Boys and Girls Club located at 615 Peacock Avenue near the historic Woodlawn Lake. This is a free, family-friendly event filled with games, prizes, music, a costume contest, food, and a haunted house. If you need more information, go to our website at odphisanantonio.org and then click on Fright Night.
I agree with DLH that usually if I'm introduced to a new setting, I will kind of say less than I need to, just because you do want to scan the room, you do want to know what they're doing. Because one thing, if everything's straight and everything's buttoned up and put together and all this, then good.
Let me just come in and work.
I'm just gonna go give me a task and I'll get that done. I know when we started the Alumni Association, my goal was like, okay, because some of the guys were like, Jaime, you should run for it. I was like, okay, cool. But if I run for it, I need the three of you to be on the board, because you need input and you need backing. And I think I'd written something that said, look, we're gonna upset a lot of people. We're gonna piss them off, because when you come in and say this is what we're gonna do, a lot of people are like, we're not doing that. And so I went in going, okay, we're gonna lose maybe half of whatever group this is, because people don't like change, and obviously what they were doing previously wasn't working. And to me, it's, do you have a good idea? Like, if I didn't know how to run it, then I wouldn't have run it. I wouldn't have done it. I would have just said, hey, I appreciate it, but I'm not doing it. You have to feel like you you can do a good job. You can't just go in and take over something, like at your job. Like I'm a civil engineer, so I can't do mechanical. I can't go to mechanical, meeting and be like, nah, y'all are doing it wrong. No, you have to have some kind of sense of, okay, I can do this a little bit better than what they're doing. So, I don't think I just walk in and start, demanding stuff or anything like that. I think you have to sit there and kind of scan the audience and see what they need.
Yeah, I think an example pinpoints to the San Antonio Alumni Association, where whenever I started coming in, my background of running Boys and Girls Clubs for multiple years and having that insight, I was essentially introduced to the San Antonio Alumni Association as a whole by participating in the Fright Night event.
Right.
And with me entering a new group, I will stay silent and assess the group. However, in that particular dynamic, one of the key things that I felt that I had is this experience and what you guys were trying to achieve, and
right.
kind of having that excitement of wanting to dive right in and help. Like, if you can help somebody and be there to save them right then and there, like you want to do that, or that's what I want to do, right? But you got to also be cautious, and that's kind of a lesson that I had to learn, being a little bit cautious in offering or extending that helping hand, because it's not necessarily always welcomed. So whenever you're coming in and you have these grand ideas, well, keep in mind everybody had pretty ideas along the way.
Yeah.
So in some cases, what you're bringing to the table doesn't have any merit yet. It has to be earned. And I made the mistake, and I had, I guess, my successes too within that Fright Night. I think I did contribute, but I was a little heavy-handed with consulting the group and saying, hey, this is what you guys should do. You should do this, you should do that. And that can rub people the wrong way, and that's exactly what happened to me, is I went a little too aggressive in that, with good intentions, but at the end of the day, without knowing those dynamics, you can really put yourself in a situation like I did. But obviously, I think it's one of those things that I've also grown in over time, and it kind of goes to one of the bigger points that I wanted to make, and that is that somebody is there to counter whatever personality trait or whatever you're bringing to the table, that somebody's there to counter it with some constructive feedback and or some realness. I think at the end of the day, you have to be told some truths, and some you don't want to hear. But all these different dynamics can come into play within those situations, which is why I have a hard time just accepting I fit in this box. Because I think they all bring different values that you have to just learn and evolve over time with.
Okay. Well said.
You want to articulate that a little bit better, DLH?
No, I don't.
Yeah, I wanted to share with you guys something that I came across when I was looking up, alpha males and stuff like that, and it basically said that, I guess when you look at alpha males, they always talk about wolves, and that's how I heard it too. But apparently, there was a scientist that said it doesn't really work with wolves. Like, wolves, they don't have alpha males, and the only way that it really works is that when you saw a pack, it was the parents. It was the male wolf and a female wolf, and they were their cubs, and so that's why you saw it as an alpha wolf. But it's really, they're just the parents. We were talking about earlier, like, you do have to have some kind of alpha male instincts when you become a parent, because, and I think most of those are just happen because you have a kid and now you want to protect that kid, and so you tap into those, just like mothers do. They want to protect their child. So I thought it was funny just reading some of the stuff about alpha males and how some of it has been debunked. And the wolf researchers kind of contacted this book that talked about alpha wolves and told them, hey, stop writing that stuff. And they declined to change their book. They said, no, we're good.
So they sound like alpha.
Yeah,
I'm gonna do it no matter what. Nobody tells me.
Yeah.
Or
Or,
isn't that part of the was it Sigma or no Omega?
that
The Omega trait
Well,
too. That according to this.
again, I think that depends on which article you go by, right? Because when you look at this this data, when I found this very interesting, that the original one from the Modern Men's Guide, they do use some negative language in there, right? This is what you do, this is what you don't do. And in this one from the Dad University, there's no negative language in here,
What's the Dad University?
right? You see the positive in all. But when you look at the beta male, and I won't like read the entire thing, but in here for beta male, they value emotional connection and tend to be good listeners. The gamma male, as parents, gamma males may exhibit a non-conventional approach, finding creative solutions and thinking outside the box when engaging with their partner and children, right? And if you go down the list, every one of these is going to have something that I think as a parent you can relate to. You can think of a situation when you had to do these very things with your partner and your children.
Absolutely.
All the way through. So, I think if you just look up Dad University magazine, I guess is what it is, but the 7 personality types, and you read whatever's in there, you will find a scenario where you had to, I guess, take out or bring out that personality type in you in order to get through that situation. So again, I think that we're depending on the situation, time of life, like all of the different things, we are exhibiting all of these, I think, at any given moment as the situation calls for it. I want to throw y'all a little bit of a curveball. This is where my curveball is going to come in.
All right. Here we go.
I
Sound
started.
effect.
I tried to look a little deeper into this because sometimes when I'm thinking I'm having the BS moment like you're having, right, and I'm doing my best to try and give it some credit. So,
Right.
where does it come from? Long story short, a lot of these things in the personality psychology realm, they come from the Big Five, right? The 5-factor model of personality. These things, and I'm just very curious to get your opinion on this, but the Big Five are extroversion, neuroticism, openness, agreeableness, and conscientiousness. Right? Those are the big 5-factor models. So
Okay.
when you get into this and extroversion, I think it makes sense when you hear that, right? It's assertive, energetic behavior. Neuroticism is emotional instability. That's the way we usually see it. Irritability, moody, that sort of stuff. Openness is just being open to experience. Sometimes, usually in intellect is how it comes to mind. Like you're open to new ideas, right? The experience is new ideas. Agreeableness just means that you're empathic, sympathetic, and kind. And then conscientiousness refers to an individual's sense of responsibility and duty as well as foresight. Now, if we look at all of those different things that are in the personality model, they all essentially tap into this,
Right.
right? So
there's repackaging.
they repackaged it, and then I think as I was reading this particular one, and this one came from, this is written by James W. Grice, this particular article, the 5-factor model of personality. But what I found really interesting in here was when they talked about how they even come up with this. According to the hypothesis, this is the lexical hypothesis. That's where the Big Five come from. The task of personality psychologists is to essentially get the traits of personality from thousands of adjectives found in language that distinguish people according to their behavioral dispositions. Right? Now, if we're going to put that in plain language, society dictates how we're defined. You use all the adjectives because the adjectives and how you describe man have changed over time.
Right.
That's why we are even having this particular discussion overall, and how we got to alpha and beta male to sigma, zeta, and whatever they want to throw in there is because people are constantly trying to find new ways to define what it is to be a modern man, right? and so you define it in slightly different ways, but ultimately it doesn't matter in what time period or whatever that you go down to. It all comes back down to these particular
Yeah. The original.
it all goes back here, you know. And I think ultimately my thought is we keep talking about how all of these things are like we're never just one thing,
Right.
but essentially I think a man, whether traditional or modern, you had to navigate the spectrum of these things to fit the situation at the time. It's just that in the moment, especially when you talk about traditional males, you weren't given the space to show emotion or
Right.
anything, right? Like anger was the one thing that was constantly expressed and was okay to express.
And it's okay for men to show anger, right?
And it was certainly okay, yes, for that. But
Not
now
females, though,
But
like-
now, but now the other stuff. And now I think if we go down that path, that's a whole different. That's its own episode.
Yeah, I kind of wish I would have looked up kind of what males or what they used to categorize males like in the 20s, because it would have been fun to read, you know, kind of how society dictated that.
Yeah. Well, 20s I can't tell you, but this lexical hypothesis is traced back to the 30s.
Wow.
Well, I'm going to throw a wrench in that. The Chinese zodiac was over 2,000 years ago, and it basically meets all that. So they probably took the Chinese zodiac, came up with those 5 pillars.
Are you talking about?
I don't think that would. I don't think that would throw a wrench in this. I think actually that would bolster the argument that this
Right.
is a timeless.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right,
well,
that
yeah,
this is timeless, and so like regardless, if we went all the way back to the
Stone
dawn of
Ages?
civilized society, we will say, when what it meant to be a man and a woman had to be defined. Now there's a whole lot of problem that's in there altogether.
Oh, no,
right?
absolutely, yeah.
But if we put that aside for the time being and stick to the topic at hand here, the way that men are defined and personality within that man. We're essentially always going to wind up getting back to some version of this big 5. It's just that
Right.
you repackage it, you relabel it, you call it something else,
Yeah.
right? And this it just goes on one time period after another,
Right.
That it's just relabeled. And here we are with 7 personality types.
6, sir. 6.
6, 7. I don't know. We can come up with. You know what? Why don't we develop an 8th one right now?
Yeah, in fact, for our listeners there, I think there's a comment section. So within that comment
Yeah.
section,
Yeah. Comment.
come up with
What
one.
other
We'd
what
like to
other
highlight it next time.
Greek alphabet?
Yeah, I'm a theta.
There is
Inside
no
out.
theta male on here
Theta.
though.
There is no theta, but why theta?
Because dominant, 8th wonder of the world.
I don't know about all that. So a
Shout out to the
website,
Theta brothers.
a website that I kind of frequent often, and I used to do it a lot more until I think I've read everything that they produce, is Art of Manliness. And in it, they were talking about you were talking about how men are perceived and what men do. This one was talking about how you raise your kids or what fathers do depends on the environment, right? So if the environment is that you have to learn how to hunt in order to live, then you would teach your kid how to hunt. You know, if the environment is you have to be pretty, you know, well educated in order to, which is kind of what we're faced with, right? You have to be well educated, you have to have a degree, then you teach your kid to have a degree or well educated. And I'd never heard it saying, well, it's environmental. You know, what is the environment is how you choose to raise your son or daughter.
Usually we divert to what we know, right?
Right.
And so if we're within
Well,
that, then if we're working a white collar job,
Yeah.
it's easier for me to show my son how to do that versus, let's say, work on the car.
So it got me thinking because when I went to college, nobody had gone to college in my family, and my dad was, you need to work, you need a job, you need to go straight to work. Why are you even messing around with high school? And so, you know, he didn't understand at the time, like, this is a better route than just going to work. And so when I read that, I was like, man, that makes so much sense. Like, it's environmental. And my dad was brought up like, as soon as you're young enough to work, you start working. And so most of us, my brothers and I, started working at 13, mowing lawns with them. but because that's what he knew. And so when I kind of broke away from that, he's like, hey, what are you doing? Like, get to work, you know? So it
Yeah,
to me,
you're
it was
like the kid that wants to be an artist.
yeah. I was
And
like,
they don't necessarily see that
you want to be a
talent,
dentist
you know what I mean?
in like the elves and what is that movie with Rudolph? Isn't it Rudolph that the elf wanted to be a dentist?
Oh yeah, that's right.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Ooh,
like, hey,
man, you went all the way back to that old holiday cartoon. Yeah.
It's like they don't have dentists here. We're gonna make some toys.
Yeah, it's making me think of that this quote. I wish I could tell you where it came from. I remember hearing it, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to screw it up in some way. But essentially, what it said was, "Strong men create easy times.
Yes.
Easy times create weak men. Weak men create chaotic times." Right.
Chaotic times bring strong men.
So
Yeah.
and it winds up
circle.
going in this.
Oh, that's interesting.
Is it a circle? Maybe it's
No,
more of a
it's-
square.
Well, but
It's a cause and effect.
it's
Yeah,
a circle of life.
It's kind of like
Yeah.
a cause and effect. Yeah. So that this is essentially cyclical,
Yeah.
right? All of this stuff is everything. Again, a topic for another time. But all the things that get recycled right now and in just popular culture that
You don't like
that
Cobra
a lot,
Kai?
that a lot of these kids think they hear this is the new thing or that they just made up, and it's like, man, we were doing that back in
Yeah.
whatever 70s, 80s.
All I know is I yearn for the times.
What the
again.
hell?
I don't even know.
I don't know what that
I don't know what
is.
that's supposed to
But
mean.
we don't have
I'm
to worry
lost.
about anything.
Sir.
I hope you're talking about DMX.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Rest in
Sound like
peace.
you, but-
Yeah.
Well, we hope you enjoyed this discussion. We thought about talking about it and kind of, I guess, expounding on some of our thoughts on it. I'd like to welcome DLH. He brings a whole different other perspective on it, and of course, David is David.
That's right.
So
Yeah.
did you come up with a catchphrase for your goodbye? Did you let it marinate over the last couple of weeks?
Catch me next time.
Catch me next time.
Like, catch me outside.
Catch me outside. Well, thanks for listening. Well, that will end this. Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from us, you can follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.